Joining us on The Informer, another guest. She's actually a leading nutrition and dietetics consultant and academic. She's an expert on just about everything called nutrition. She's an adjunct professor. I can call her Dr. Elizabeth Isenring. Welcome to The Informer, Liz.
Wonderful. So happy to be here, George.
Now tell me something. What in heaven's name got into you when you were a young woman and said, nutrition's my game, that's where I see a future?
Good question. Well, do you want the long or the short? I'll keep it pretty short. So look, I'm a foodie. I've always loved food. And I think I discovered probably around the age of 11 or 12 that I could cook, and I like to cook. So I've always had that love of good food. But you probably don't know this. I actually did not start my career as a dietitian, but as a pharmacist. And I think it's similar. You know, you make up, well, 20 or 30 years ago, you follow a recipe, you make up the products. But as I soon discovered, that's not the way it is anymore. You stick labels on things. And while I have a lot of my good friends are pharmacists, so I'm not rubbishing that career at all, but I soon realized that I don't like just treating symptoms. I like getting to the cause of things, and I like making things and experimenting things. So I came to nutrition after a little bit of a
journey.
Delayed. I did, yeah.
Liz, in this incredibly modern world of ours, much of our lives are sedentary. And I know that my favourite dish is seconds.
Yes.
So the leading question here is, dietitians can mean the world to us, and they're becoming more and more important. When did it dawn on you that we had to look at the way we ate our food, the way we prepared ourselves, and more importantly, how we sustained ourselves throughout a year? You didn't get into binge eating habits and this, that, and the other. And the world seems to be full of binge. So how do we move past that and get into much of the nutrition and good habits that you're instilling, especially with your product, LINC Nutrition?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly, I think probably it did start off with those early years in terms of pharmacy, where, you know, people would come in and it was all about all the different symptoms, trying to manage the symptoms, and then they'll go on a different medication to manage the symptoms or side effects of the previous one. And I thought, look, there's got to be a better way. So I think then realizing the importance of preventative. And of course, you know, nutrition is right up there. So, you know, things like stopping smoking, moving more, but really nutrition, depending which research you look at, you know, at least a quarter, if not a third, and some even argue half, of preventable disease. You know, if we just improved our nutrition, you know, we'd wipe so much of that. So I think it's really important. Adding to your bit about the binge culture, absolutely. And I think during this sort of challenging time, a lot of us are finding us in now, it's gotten even more extreme, hasn't it? Because, you know, we've got Uber Eats on demand, you know, we can just walk out the street. When my kids were younger, they would tell directions by, you know, McDonald's or KFCs, and that was their map, which I found highly offensive. I tried to knock that out of them, but I tell you what, those yellow arches are, you know, visible to everyone. So I hope that, you know, this period has helped us to slow down a little bit and maybe appreciate the importance of what actually we put in to nourish not just our mind, but nourish our body as well. So I think
I keep hearing moderation all the time, and I've heard it for a lifetime.
Yeah.
But the thing that fascinates me is we are such incredible animals. You put pressure on us, we eat. Comfort eating, they call it. You stress us, we eat. We get, it's cold, we eat. It seems to me that even when it's hot and wonderful and maybe like a beautiful day on the Gold Coast, you still want to eat, but the difference is you want to eat beautiful watermelons and fruits and things like that. How do we get out of the bad habits and get into the good habits? Because Lord knows it's a lot easier to be bad than to be good.
Well, certainly falling into those traps, and our world, is made for convenience, isn't it? So I guess the first thing is it's pretty hard to take on evolution, and my advice is don't fight nature, because we're not going to win.
Oh dear.
I also, your point about moderation, and while it's true, I know it's not sexy. No one wants to hear that. So I prefer perhaps, the 80-20 rule. So if we try and do the right thing 80% of the time, it means that we can enjoy those foods, like you say, when we're stressed or angry or celebrate. I know in many different cultures, it all centers around, the food and the dining table. So I think getting the basics right, cooking a little bit more at home, knowing what's going into the food. Maybe when we're allowed out and about again, make friends with local farmers or go to farmers markets and actually find out how they're growing the food and use more of that. I think if people just sort of experimented with different fruits and veggies and just added, a simple thing, just add an extra serve of fruit and veg a day, it's in terms of the way you feel and decreasing the risk of disease down the track, tremendous payoff. If we had a pill that could do that, everyone would want it.
That's the chemist in you. That's the pharmacist
Yeah,
in
that's
you.
true.
Sneaking through, just flashing through.
Yeah, a little bit.
As we get older, we have to be even smarter. We have to be even more aware. I mean, for example, my mother had to go in a little while back and have a procedure, and the medicine and her appetite and what she was eating to prepare to go in was very different. So is that a very big part of what you're doing too these days? Mapping out those must-haves and do's?
Yeah, absolutely. So very much part of my academic role was supporting people through nutrition in a range of things. So one was people with cancer going through treatment. So that's one of my specialities. Yep. The other one is, older adults. So, as we get older, of course, as you mentioned, taste changes. So we tend to lose our appetite, and combined with that, we tend to lose muscle. And unfortunately, it's that muscle which helps us, get out of the chair, get off the floor. It's so closely related to quality of life. So we have to actually do stuff, which is, eating good quality protein, having lots of fresh fruit and veggies to meet all those nutrients to help slow down that natural loss, which tends to happen, but back in the day, people were still active on farms or still doing a lot of physical work. But of course now, because we tend to be more sedentary, we got to work extra hard to deal with time and gravity, actually. They're not very forgiving.
And sugary drinks is another thing. We need to break that nexus. We need to break that hole that they seem to have over us and move on and look to be drinking more, hydrating more in a manner that's healthy.
Absolutely. So we'll always say, water's best, and particularly up here in the tropics or the warmer states of Queensland, it's a bit easier to enjoy water. For those who don't like the taste of water, there's so many other things you can do. You can add fruits and different herbs and spices or even to soda waters. And remember, of course, we get our hydration through foods and things as well. So salads and fruit. And even cups of tea and coffee, although I tend to not like people living on coffee. We can talk about that, but a little bit of coffee is actually quite good. But like everything, there's that threshold.
We're talking to adjunct professor Elizabeth Isenring. She's an academic. She's a nutrition specialist. She's a former pharmacist who still loves and has a great appetite for mixing things in a very special way. But Liz, you touched on coffee. In my lifetime, we've gone from being tea drinkers in Australia to creating this whole new lifestyle where our day does not start until we have our latte, our double macchiato, our cappuccino, everything except a black coffee or a cup of tea. So, and we're seeing people drink it all day. Now, surely that can't, I know it
And
feels
in
good.
huge containers as well.
Oh, so you've been to America.
Yes. Well, I was going to say, yes, and some of my Aussie colleagues, we would search out trying to look for that little Aussie or little Italian coffee place, in all of the US. So yes, we definitely have become diehard gourmet coffee.
So what do you
fans.
recommend? What's a fair hit of coffee to give you the stimulant that we need, or the lifter? And what's an unsafe coffee intake?
So, yeah, absolutely. So generally, up to about 3, maybe 4 of the espresso type or the real coffees, the shop bought coffees, or if you're lucky enough to have a coffee machine at home, is probably good. Instant coffee has less caffeine, so you could probably go away with a little bit more. Once you start hitting more than about 4 or so a day, then it's that trade-off. You're actually going to can increase things like anxiety, sleeplessness, all those sorts of things. So it's a trade-off. Plus, we've got some really good lower caffeine options like your teas or different sort of herbal products. So I think not just guzzling them down. My other concern is with the teenagers and the energy drinks, or as you said, those great big things, iced coffees and things you can get from a lot of the cafes now. We're setting up our teenagers and our growing young adults for artificial stimulants, which is not great either.
It's not artificial, but I want to talk about the array of drinks. Sorry, milk.
Yes.
The range of all manner.
Yes, milks.
Oat milk, almond milk, stuff I'd heard of but never ever seen. We go into a supermarket today, and they have shelves that go almost 50 metres down the aisle. What's going on, and what are we saying to ourselves? Should we be drinking? I know we have problems with people who can be maybe lactose intolerant, and there's a need for an option. But what's your recommendation? What would the good doctor say?
Well, I was going to say, our good answer to these sorts of questions is always about it all depends. But basically, I think the options have become too confusing. It's nice to have some options. So whether you can tolerate dairy or want some of the lower fat options, interesting now. We know, as opposed to the 70s where it was all, cut fat out of everything, we actually now know that the fat that's contained in dairy seems to be handled a bit better by the body. So it's not super great, but it's also not super bad like we thought it was. But then for those who might be lactose intolerant, there's a range of things. You can add little enzymes to get rid of it. You can have the lactose-free milk. Then, of course, there's things like soy and some of the legume milks. I'm okay with things like soy and some of the nut milks. I'm a little bit cautious with things like rice and oat milks because, to be honest, in my opinion, they shouldn't be called milk because they're not equivalent to milk. They're actually very low in protein, and most of them now have calcium because they add it to it. But certainly, you've got to be careful with kiddies. And often what happens is the mum or the dad might introduce a new milk to the family, and then it starts getting used by the whole family. And with some of those milks, they're okay for adults as long as they're eating well, but they're actually not the best option for kids or teenagers. So just being a little bit aware about that is probably a good thing.
Liz Isenring is our guest on The Informer. If people want to know more about their health, about their diets and about their nutrition, how can they reach out to you, Liz?
Yeah, I'm across all the socials, Dr. Liz, so feel free to check that out. I also have a website, drliznutrition.com, and I have various blogs, and I love different questions and scenarios and things. So I really encourage people to reach out.
And it probably explains why you've created this program, LINC Culture. You've brought everything together, huh?
I have brought it together. So it does actually stand for Liz Isenring Nutrition Consulting, which a lot of people don't realise. I know with it, but the other idea is to bring it all together. That's right.
Well, I think you have brought it all together. You've told us a fantastic story. Once again, you've also given us an insight into a professional who understands that there are demons out there in all of us, and we've got to try and keep them at bay. Liz, thank you very, very much. Enjoy the rest of the week, and also as Christmas approaches, is there one bit of warning for everyone? in terms of our nutrition? What should we try and avoid as much as possible?
I think the key is remember that none of this food on the buffet, or we might not be able to do buffets now, but none of this food is going away. So you don't need to pile it all on your plate as if you're never going to get it again. I think the other thing is to have a little bit of what you really want rather than thinking you've got to have a bit of absolutely every possible thing. And I'd also probably try and limit it just to the couple of days around the real Christmas period. I mean, it starts in December with the Christmas parties, but you don't have to full on go into the Christmas, just maybe a couple of days around Christmas and then get back into the walking and the exercise.
So what you're saying is if I want a second piece of the chocolate cake, that's it, right? 2 pieces. Thank you, Liz.
2 pieces would be good. No problem, my pleasure.